Thank you, Vic. Warm welcome to our incoming chair, Bill C. All right, we of course would like to give a nice big thank you to 10 Barrel. What a fabulous space, right? Go Headlines. Thank you, 10 Barrel. And I see this evening they're trying a new pilot of a buffet that you can check out. I think it's a little extra. You can go Flying Body for that, or wristband. I think the food's going to go away after we get started, so if you haven't had any yet, feel free to still go and get that taken care of. Of course you can. It's all you can eat tonight. Absolutely. So these fine folks who are joining us tonight are here also because we have the pleasure and the honor of some wonderful platinum and gold and media partners out there. I'd really like to thank SunWest Builders and Miller Lumber for really putting it out so that we can have such a great event. Looks like they have some fun swag over there for you this evening, and they've been a great sponsor in our gold level, and then all the media partners as well. So thank you, but more so thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. This has become an annual event. We have both a long legislative session and a short legislative session. We had a tremendous win for our community here this year, as many of you know, but more importantly, I'd like you to get to know the folks in the room, because we have also not only a new face, but one who is getting ready to leave us here in retirement as well. And so please help me introduce and welcome Senator Tim Knopp with Senate District 27 here in Bend, serving Bend, Redmond, Sun River, and Tumalo. Senator. New to all of us, but not new to our legislature, and a wonderful addition to our region, Senator Cliff Bentz, Senate District 30 from Ontario. But you need to hear where all he serves. Baker, Grant, Harney, Jefferson, Mount Here, Wheeler, and parts of Clackamas, Deschutes, Lake, Marion, and Wasco counties. He deserves a round of applause for just that. I heard he made a loop today, clear to Salem, from Ontario to Salem to here, so he's getting after it. I'd also like to welcome as their House Republican leader, serving District 55 Palbutte area and encompassing areas of Deschutes, Crook, Jackson, Klamath, and Lake counties, Representative Mike McLean. And last but not least, taking us out in his retirement and enjoying the way, serving House District 53 with Sun River, Deschutes County, and the areas outside of Bend, Representative Gene Wisnick. Unable to join us after all this evening is local lobbyist, many of you know him, Eric Kanzler. However, I will say there are a couple folks in the audience that I might draw upon to bring us back around to, again, this short legislative session recap. With that, I want to give the format a moment. Each senator and representative will share a little bit of what they experienced this year in the short session. They'll also talk a bit about the two bills that they sponsored and some of the, what's ahead. After they give each one of those recaps, we'll have a bit of an exchange with them and then go to audience Q&A, which is always the favorite part of being at this, right? It's a fantastic reason. So with that, Senator Knopp would like to start with you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you this evening and to be with old friends, but as Lisa Cannon reminded me, I don't have old friends, I have young friends. I don't have any old friends. So it's nice to be with all my young friends this evening. And it's a pleasure and an honor to serve you in the Oregon State Senate. And it's been great to be able to serve alongside what used to be Representative Cliff Bentz, and now is Senator Bentz, and we're excited to have him in the Oregon State Senate. And he's a great addition to the Senate, has great knowledge of many issues, and is a true public servant. So that was one of the best things that happened this legislative session, is that he came over to our side. So a loss to the House, of course, and we apologize for the taking their leader, McLean. But it was a great session really for Central Oregon, and so To recap, the #1 priority for Central Oregon and the community really was $39 million worth of bonds for OSU Cascades campus. And our community really stuck together and worked hard on that. And we had some shock and disappointment last July. Very unhappy. And now we are happy. The governor worked with us, the legislative leadership worked with us, Central Oregon delegation worked hard, and our community worked hard, and we ended up with a positive result. And so I think we can safely say that there is now a significant long-term commitment to OSU Cascades here in Central Oregon, and a growing recognition that is an 8th campus and not just a stepsister of OSU in Corvallis. So, yes, so that was exciting. Other things that happened that I thought were really important is there was a bill that was passed that made strangulation a felony. And in Oregon, it had a relatively light sentence. And when we're talking about issues of domestic violence and strangulation, it's critically important that we send a message and a penalty that fits the crime. And so, in a bipartisan way, we were able to work in a short session and get something done that has honestly been around for about 20 years. There's been about a 20-year effort to try to do this. And so, with law enforcement support, with advocate support, with DA support, we were able to get that done. I thought it was really important coming out of this short session. A couple other bills that I think will have a long-lasting impact are, there's a bill that had some regional interest, and that was essentially a bill that allowed equine therapy centers like Healing Reins to operate legally with what they do. And so they provide, for those of you who don't know, most of you do know, but they provide therapy on horses for child abuse victims, sex abuse victims, veterans with post-traumatic stress, and many others. And part of the problem is that some of that therapy is not on the back of a horse, and an EFU zoned property, that is a problem. And so we were proactive in fixing that problem this session. And whenever you're dealing with land use, usually it is very contentious, and there is almost no contention whatsoever. This bill, I did not have a lot of hope we were going to get it done in one session. But nonetheless, we worked on it. I was able to get a committee bill for it. And the advocates, including Jeff Campbell, who worked really hard on this, it went through pretty quickly and easily as it relates to land use bills. All the rest of my land use bills over the past 11 years have died. So it gives you an idea how difficult that might be. And then there was a bill also that had a local element to it, and that was essentially a bill that said you cannot terminate parental rights on the sole basis of an intellectual disability. And so it's a parental rights bill for people with intellectual disabilities. And there was a couple in Redmond that had had their children taken away, and really it was mainly because they had an intellectual disability. And I don't think that's who we are as a community. And so we went to work for them, and their process went through the courts, and they've been partially successful. But to me, a community value is that we don't terminate your parental rights just because you have a disability. We as a community surround you and say, how can we help you parent your kids? And so I think that's what we ought to be doing, not terminating parental rights, because we have a huge problem in our foster care system. And if you've been reading the headlines, you know that that's true. And so there's people who have difficult jobs in that particular arena with child protective services and all that. But we wanted to be very clear from the state policy perspective that we are not going to allow the termination of parental rights solely based on the disability. And I thought that was really important as well this session. And so there were other things that happened, but I want to leave plenty of time for the new senator who covers, it sounds like, pretty much the whole state of Oregon. I'm not sure if we're even necessary anymore because he has so many counties, but I think we ought to hear from Senator Vince.
Thank you, Senator Cadeau. Senator Vince, thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Ken Barrow, for this great opportunity, and thank you, Senator Cadeau, for your very kind words. I have to say, moving from the House to the Senate is a huge change, primarily because the House is very loud and very busy, and the Senate is very quiet, and becomes opposite about 3 times a day, at least 3 times a day. The other thing that's hugely different about the Senate district as compared to a House district is that, particularly mine, is the huge number of people I see here. Usually my town halls are in places like Jordan Valley or Crane or others, and there's usually 12 or 15 people there, maybe 2 or 3 dogs, and that's a large crowd. So this is pretty amazing. It's great being in the Senate after 10 years in the House, and I hate to say this to our fearless leader, McLean, but the difference is that there's so few people. You don't dare make anybody mad, I'm telling you, because it'll come back to haunt you the next day. Whereas in the House, there's lots of folks. So that was a real lesson I learned in the first couple of days. So on to the legislation. I want to mention something about Gene Wisnett and something that he did for this area that will long outlive his presence in the House, and that is the addition of $50 million for your new interchange on the outskirts of town here. That's going to happen, and you can thank Representative Wisnett for it. That transportation package, which I enjoyed being vice co-chair of, took enormous amounts of work, is going to change this area dramatically. We also were able to put $21 million into the Terrebonne interchange, a very dangerous area, and we were able to put large sums of money back into Eastern Oregon counties through a series of very important parts in that bill. The reason I raise it now, well, because although we passed it way back in July, is that we did a little fix-it bill this time around, because when you do a bill of that size and that complexity, there are going to be fixes that have to be made, and we were able to get that first fix-it bill passed. This is hugely important because, as many of you know, the road, the 97 and Bend in particular, Redmond in particular, will be the staging area when we have the cataclysmic event over on the coast. And this will be the space from which you bail out the Willamette Valley. So having your roads work, terrifically important. Again, the fix-it bill, this time there will be a much larger bill in the next session that will address other shortcomings than what we passed just 8 months ago. But the other bill I would like to mention is the affordable housing bill that we did pass. I voted against it, and I voted against it not because I'm opposed to affordable housing. I'm totally supportive. But the way of funding it this time around was based upon the increased filing fee that folks will have to pay. If we're going to do affordable housing, and there should be a broader mechanism for managing how we pay for it. I want to mention transit. We included in the transportation package a new transit funding mechanism, which should be hugely important for this area. And one of the reasons I supported the 1/10 of 1% employee payroll tax for transit is because I noticed the enormous amount of traffic between Madras, Redmond, and Bend, and the fact that you need better transit bringing people this direction from where I hope there's more affordable housing north of this location than what appears to be available here. The transit fee should help with buses and bus service. That is also going to be looked at very closely again in the forthcoming session some months out. The last thing I'm going to mention, there were what, 100 bills? We passed 200 bills, roughly 200 bills. So those that we mentioned up here, I hope your questions bring up other ones that we should talk about. But the advanced directive bill, I was put on judiciary for the first time. I don't know how many of you have gone to your lawyer or to a hospital and filled out the paperwork that applies should you be in the last months of your life, but you should. These documents were revised and repaired, and sadly the bill that contains those revisions passed. I voted against it. Why? I'm a lawyer. I have helped hundreds of people fill out these forms. The forms that we just passed are inadequate. Why are they inadequate? My mom almost passed away here at St. Charles about 12 years ago. And my dad and I and the bishop were down here in St. Charles with her advanced directive in front of us. The same form that's been Oregon law for the past 20 years. That form does not help those who have to make decisions make the right decision. It's not clear enough. And when you're being asked to make a decision to end a person's life, you do not want any confusion, right? This is important to the person who's in the last moments of their life, but it's also important to the people who are trying to make those decisions. And you need to be able to look at those documents and know for sure that whoever signed them knew what they were signing when you're making the decision for them. Sadly, those forms are inadequate, and we had to vote against them. That will be coming back, and we will try to put in appropriate amendments to make those documents work better. I want to thank Senator Knopp again for his very kind remarks. He was hugely helpful to me in the last 40 days, my initial days in the Senate, and I look forward to working with him as we move into the future. Thank you so much. Look forward to answering your question.
Great way to introduce yourself to this audience. You're very welcome here, Senator Benz. Representative McLean, we always enjoy hearing your recap and what you have to say.
Thank you. You can hear, right?
I think it actually needs to be either closer or louder, or I'll swap.
I probably have to get it closer then. All right, that works. Well, I live in Powellview. I work in Bend at Lynch Conner McLean Law Firm with Shannon McCabe sitting over there. And we're off Chandler, just across the street from the best darn university in the state of Oregon, OSU Cascades. So thank you, Becky Johnson, for your hard work. And Jamie, you know, this short session is hard. Your leadership and making sure we knew what the chamber wanted, the folks here active in it. Your mayor, Casey Rhodes, can't say enough about that guy. You know, the commissioners, especially Tammy Bainey, was fantastic. Tony DeBone, fantastic. You know, the folks in Central Oregon are very engaged. Being east of the mountains, well, I should say, you know, we have to traverse those mountains, sometimes on an hour notice before you have a hearing. I think that's unfair, frankly. Folks from Portland and Eugene can get in their vehicle and appear and testify in front of the legislature, and you can't when you only have an hour notice. And so we have to be very proactive. Our delegation works well together. Cliff Betts and Betsy Johnson have been the honorary members of the Central Oregon delegations. Betsy Johnson, as you know, her parents grew up in Redmond, or were part of big folks in Redmond. Betsy's an honorary member of the Central Oregon legislative delegation. Cliff Betts has been for a long time because we put him to work. And so now for him to get some officially on the job now means we can work him without guilt, which I am looking forward to. I never really had guilt anyway. He ran the transportation package. He's the author of the transportation package. Cliff Betts was. I mean, the guy who wrote it and developed that is sitting right here and is now part of the Central Oregon delegation. We received in Central Oregon about $75 to $80 million worth of projects. Central Oregon did very well. In fact, I know Cliff has had to answer why Central Oregon did so well. And I'm sure he's given many appropriate answers. They might be changing from time to time, and I don't care. I just know we're going to fix Cooley Road, We're going to fix Terrebonne, and even Old Prideville got some new sidewalks, so God bless that. This year was, thank God we ended it early. And I had two bills that I chief sponsored. One bill, House Bill 4035, I chief sponsored with Representative Wisnett, Colonel Wisnett here, and I don't know if you know this, but our National Guard, Army National Guard, is now 50th in the nation in recruiting. And we are award-winning National Guard. Since World War II, when the 41st Infantry Brigade was called up and deployed to Southeast Asia, they just performed spectacular. And we are 50th in the nation in recruiting. Millennials are not joining the National Guard at the rate we need to make sure we have a ready force available to our governor for everything from, public security to transportation corridors in case of a state emergency to fighting fires, as well as the federal mission defending our country. So we're the only state in the United States that doesn't offer tuition assistance to enlisted members of the National Guard. So if you're at Oregon State University and you want to graduate debt-free, you now can because of House Bill 4035. And we got that passed. It passed unanimously. It's going to be signed by the governor. I mean, she could always change her mind. I doubt it, but because she told me she would sign it. That is a big, big step for Oregon, very needed. And then the other bill that I introduced was a 4036, which was a bill to make sure that charter school kids, who are public school kids, we've got private school kids and we have public school kids, and amongst public school kids there are charter schools and neighborhood schools, right? So what happened is we're starting to see some of the neighborhood schools for some reason, sort of say, look, if you're in a charter school, you can't play sports or you can't participate in choir, and it's just popping up. And so we wanted to pass a law to make sure that every public school kid in Oregon has equal footing to participate in sports and extracurricular activities. Because I know there are other parents in the room. I have 3 children, and by God's grace, they're all graduating from high school. Because I had severe doubts there for a while. And I mean, as many people who raise teenagers, right? But I had 2 kids which are just crazy smart. One actually goes to OSU Cascades, and one who's graduated from college. But I had another one who's incredibly creative, and he did not learn in a classroom. He just could not have it. Anyway, unique learner. Redmond Proficiency Academy saved that kid. Can't say enough about RPA. RPA in Redmond, that kid is now a lifetime learner. He's excited. He graduated from high school. He's doing wonderful things. Love RPA. But he needed a different learning environment. So frankly, when I heard about some charter school kids being discriminated against because they needed that tool, I just said, we can't let this happen. And so unfortunately, we had to pass a law to tell people to do the right thing from Bedford to Beaverton. And that passed, and I believe the governor will sign it. Those were my 2 bills. Now, Gene Wisnett is retiring. I hope I'm not, but I could be retired by popular demand in November. But Gene, you should have seen the amount. I don't know if you guys don't get to see this. There is no one more beloved in the legislature than Gene and Josie Wisnett, and Josie's in the back. But I just want to tell you how wonderful this guy has represented us. It's been so fun to go to every doggone Greek dinner and hear everyone tell stories about you. But thank you, and I'm going to let you finish this here.
Senator Benson, Josie's unemployed next year. That would change the Senate. You got Josie over there working in the Senate. So, thank you for coming out tonight, Jamie. I'll echo what's been said. You're really blessed to have Jamie working. She works with us great. We try to give her as much information as we can in our calls, and thank you for being actively involved. It's sad and happy to be leaving the legislature. Josie and I have served, when we finish, it'll be 15 years, 8 terms. And I really enjoyed it. miss a lot of things like these guys here. Sometimes I won't miss the editorials in the bulletin, but that's part of the job, and I take that on. This last session, 2017, was really a big year. Do you have any school teachers here? No school teachers? I had a lot of good bills that passed in 2017, adding school nurses, national board certified teachers, money for that. And so this short session, which I've never voted for and never liked, but we did have some good things. The best thing is an 8 days shorter than it could have been. But the one bill that I got some press, I hope everyone, my newsletter just came out yesterday with my comments about the short session and what we're able to do. And one of the bills I started last session, wasn't able to complete it, but it's really a good bill for PERS people and for the taxpayers of Oregon. We passed a bill that the bulletin labeled the Nick Bellotti bill. It says if you work for a university and you have outside income, that cannot be used to raise your retirement funds. The PERS board told me that it was taken care of, and our attorneys in the Legislative Council office said not for sure, so let's do a bill to take care of that. And we did. And the majority of the PERS people don't make $500,000 like the athletic director and coach at Oregon, University of Oregon did. So that's been corrected now, so that's stopped. And we need to continue to do things, find other ways that we can correct some of the abuses in the PERS system. We did get that passed through both chambers unanimously. And you know, I guess Representative McLean and I, and even my senators, our senators over there, all of our bills are bipartisan, believe it or not. We can't pass a bill unless we have Democrats on our bills. So all of our bills that we're talking about to you tonight get passed. I served on Ways and Means most of my career. This session I was on Ways and Means and also on capital construction, so I was able to work with the Central Oregon delegation, Dr. Johnson's team and everything, and get the money. I was able to carry that bill on the floor of the House and through the Ways and Means process. That was a real honor because I've been here since 2003. OSU Cascade consisted of one building that Central Oregon Community College really screwed us on that lease. And thank you, they're good business. Dr. Johnson did not sign that lease. We had an unbelievable lease. So a few years ago we did during the recession, and we had to fight because there was a lot of people who didn't want a university here. They felt they had enough. But we really fought. We fought to get them funding because they were only in the third and fourth year. We talked about that. We finally got the building that for graduate students. And then this year we got, we're able to, everyone team effort to get this $39 million. This guy played a lot of important and backdoor meetings and stuff like that. So we've got it, and we should all be proud of that. And we look forward. Dr. Johnson told me earlier tonight we're going to be up to 2,500 or more in a couple of years. So that's really a plus for Central Oregon. The other bill, some of you have, I'm sure, have children in the Ben Lapine school system. All of us got a letter from the superintendent with some great ideas for school safety. We got them so late. All of us tried to come up with, try to figure out ways to do it, and we all argued to try to implement some of those. It was just too late, and I think all those that are returning next session, I'm sure everyone up here will, they're going to look at those and introduce those. I had a bill that was being worked and was asked to support it because of my background in Commission for Children and Families. There was a request for more mental health providers in the school-based health clinics and in our schools. And there was a ask for $950,000. Well, the rumor was that it was only going to be funded at about $600,000. But I sent a letter in, and we got I talked a lot to the people that make the decision, where the money, who gets the money and everything. And we did get $950,000 additional money for mental health support providers in our schools. And so I hope that'll address some of the safety issues. So those were the big things. We can talk, and we're here to hear your questions. Again, thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to miss it, Josie and I, but there's a lot of people talking about us leaving Oregon. We're not planning to leave Oregon. We will leave Oregon for longer trips and vacation and to visit our family on the East Coast. again, thank you for coming out tonight.
Representative, do you mind if we ask Josie to come up to the front here with you and just say a little something? I'll just honor her too. She's kind of half of the party.
She does this for me.
Yeah, great.
I'm going to borrow mine. You guys borrow mine. I don't do that. I'm never usually allowed to use a microphone. So my name is Josie, and I sleep with the boss. And I say that because my husband announced the other night that he spent 15 years down in Salem, and we probably lived over 60 months in a motel room. So when he asked me to come with him to Salem, when he offered me a motel room, I mean, what more could I take? You know? So I just wanted to let you know that it was well worth it. It's very important that we help each other and support each other. And many of you, I've read your letters, we've read your letters, I passed on the emails to Jean. And everyone works together as a family down there, and you really do become family. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So before we move on completely, a couple of things. I was remiss, it's been a while, but my cohort from our Ben Chamber Advocacy Council as a member, and many of you know him as a former city councilor, and the owner of the Sun Mountain Fun Center that gave us that great parking lot for that awesome real estate forecast breakfast that we had. Scott Ramsey's joining us as a co-moderator today. Mike and Jean and others, you commended me and I appreciate that. I feel so lucky to be a part of something like OSU Cascades and the things and the leadership. But I have to tell you, I'm so blessed. I feel so pleased to have our brand new CEO, not that brand new anymore, Katie Brooks joining us now. She takes it up to what we often do, if you'd like, I like kicking it off with a question from her, or maybe a comment or something to get us started, and then Scott and I will go around and co-moderate the room for some questions. And of course, if you have other things that come up that you think of as the audience begins to engage you, please, let's go there. So, Katie.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, each one of you, for coming tonight, and thank you for your service. We so appreciate you representing our region to the state. And we're working really hard to raise awareness for the things that are needed in Central Oregon, keep us thriving. And you folks are stalwart representatives and senators. Thank you for your work. So my question is moving towards next session. And there was a little bit of unfinished business over the cap and trade / cap and invest legislation. I've been hearing a little bit about it since session closed, that they're gearing this up for next year. At the Chamber, we entertain both sides for and against, trying to evaluate where this is going to land this season, this session. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, whoever would like to go, all four of you perhaps, on is this going to stay alive, what does it look like, and what kind of conversations can we look forward to moving into next session?
Well, I'll start. The brain of the Republican Energy Committee went to the Senate. So it was Cliff. And so we still rely on him. So I think he's actually the guy from the Senate and the House to help shape that bill. Basically, bottom line is, I think there is consensus to say that if we're going to reduce carbon emissions, which have already been reduced by 13% in the last 15 years. We've passed a low carbon fuel standard, a coal and clean bill. There's been multiple environmental bills, and so we already have been a model in a lot of respects in this country in reducing carbon emission. The question becomes, if we're going to take this step and have a California-style cap and trade system, which has been renamed multiple times, the most current name is called the Clean Energy Jobs Act. I don't know what the proponents will name it next year, but we're going to call it cap and trade for the purpose of at least this meeting. If you're going to have a California-style cap and trade, then we're going to have to all accept the fact that costs are going to go up. And in districts that, I don't know if you saw the Oregonian came out with on OregonLine.com, the median income for counties. If you look at District 55, my district, certainly Cliff's district, we represent the least earning counties. So Republicans, me in particular, represents a district that, compared to urban areas, is poor. So for me to support a bill, I have to say to the folks I represent, because I have to, they send me to Salem to represent their interests, I have to say, look, even though you're already on a budget, even though your incomes are substantially less than other areas of the state, you're being asked to increase your costs, the costs of your consumer goods, your utilities and stuff, and they want to know, what do we get for that? If we're going to contribute financially, significantly per family, are we going to actually reduce climate change? Are we going to have a positive outcome? I've asked that question of the proponents, and I have not had one person yet, not one person tell me, yes, we will. I have them tell me that if we do this and the following other things occur, then collectively, in the long term, there will be a positive effect on climate change. And so for me in 2019, if the people from District 55 send me back, is that I have to ask that question and say, what do we get when we pay for this? Because this will be extremely expensive. And now, I just look at that side. I know on the other side there are banks of cash that the proponents are saying we're going to give out. But as you just saw in the Oregonian, Oregon doesn't have a good track record with the other side. Those types of, they're currently indicting from the, multiple people associated with the business energy tax credit. You've got other indictments coming down, not indictments, but I should say tax credit issues going on. So there has to be some sort of balance. That's why in 2019 I'd sum it up in this. If you're a proponent of the bill, you need to answer that question. If members of Central Oregon, or members certainly anywhere in the state of Oregon, if our families are going to pay hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands more a year for their consumer goods and utilities and etc., what will they achieve? And if we can't tell them they're going to have any impact on climate change, other than maybe one day, then I'm not sure you can ask them to incur that cost. And that's my perspective, at least where it stands today. I'm open to a consensus-based bill, but no one has produced for me the ability to actually show the connection. Now, Cliff, I know has worked more on it. Maybe you could rebut.
I'm not Cliff. I'm going to introduce the brain in a minute. But here's my deal. Second largest group I spoke to in Salem this session was a group that was interested in, what's it called now, the Clean
Energy Jobs.
Clean Energy Jobs.
Cap and Invest.
Yes, it was Cap and Invest, and before that was Cap and Trade and a bunch of other stuff. So we know what polls the best. Not hard to figure out. But they were very interested in that. So I should just tell you the largest group I spoke to was the realtors. So if you're a realtor, you should be proud that you were the biggest group that came to Salem this session to advocate for housing and a strong economy. But when I look at that clean energy jobs bill?
Clean energy
Clean
jobs.
energy. I'm getting used to it.
More jobs.
Yeah, more jobs. That's it. Is like, how many jobs does that produce? Not that many actually. There wasn't, there's nothing really definitive. And then I said, if I'm going to vote for something that's going to raise the cost for all my constituents, I want to know what they get for it. What does this region get for it? And we don't get very much. And the reason we don't is because they're wanting to pass that cash out to rural areas. Well, I don't represent much of a rural area anymore. The most rural my district gets is where I live, on 10 acres, just east of Bend. Otherwise, it's pretty much City of Red Bend, City of Bend, Sun River, and that metropolis of Tomahawk. So that is the question, the two questions really that concern me about the bill. If it's a jobs bill, is it creating jobs, or are we just eliminating jobs here and creating more jobs over here? Or an equal amount, or maybe not. And then, if we're raising costs, what are you getting for that? Because as the good leader said, nobody's been able to definitively say we're actually going to make any progress with climate change. And so a bunch of that money, I can't remember the percentage, but the brain will know the percentage, is dedicated, has to be dedicated to roads, to Constitution. Because that's kind of just the way it is, you know? And then there's some other dedicated funds. But then there's this pot of money, and then there's going to be this group of people that we're going to get to spend it. And the legislature gets some oversight eventually, but I didn't really like the feel of the way that bill was put together. And they were really trying to rush, and so I didn't think it was ready for the 2018 session. I will tell you this though, in the 2019 session, business needs to be at the table. Because if you're not at the table, you are on the menu, and you need to make sure that you are getting answers to what I think are those very important questions. And now I'm going to introduce the brain, apparently on this issue, who is going to inform us of all the details.
But one thing the brain understands is that I'm the newest guy in the Senate and the lowest on the totem pole, so it will be me suggesting to those who are in leadership what might work, what might not. I heard a phrase today as I was driving over to meet on this exact issue with some folks in Salem that I thought was really well stated, and it was between China and India and other places, there will be far more CO2 generated than we can possibly imagine. And why would we in Oregon pay more for the inevitable? Why would we pay more for the inevitable? Great phrase. So the question becomes, in any of these conversations, are you going to mitigate, that is, drive down CO2, or are you going to adapt, which means you try to get used to warmer, hotter, drier? And in my part of the state, because I grew up out near Burns, our life was a constant battle of getting along with less water. That's what I grew up doing, figuring out how to irrigate our ranch with less water. So I know all about adapting. The question is, if we're going to see a future of hotter, warmer, drier, how do we raise the money to adapt? And therein is the issue. And that's when Senator Cano correctly points out, if we're going to have a bill that addresses climate, who gets the money, who spends the money, and how do we guarantee that the money doesn't suddenly migrate into things having little to do with carbon reduction or with even adaptation. And as anyone knows, when you see a lot of money coming in, there's lots of people there to spend it. And if we look at the British Columbia example or the Quebec example, we will see that the money is soon hijacked away from climate issues and into other things, which none of us, I don't think, up here are going to support that. For a brand new member of the Senate, the challenge is to figure out politically how to address these issues in the best way possible. You folks are fortunate in having Senator Cano, who is experienced and knows how best to approach these issues in the small confines of the Senate. It is the most, I want to go back to the most amazing difference, I hope I never forget it. The House is like a collection of 2-year-olds with hammers. It's amazing. Everybody running every which direction, a lot of racket and a lot of destruction. The Senate is stuck in a much smaller group trying to manage what emerges from the House. And well, a much smaller group of people that one must get along with. I enjoyed working extremely closely with Representative McLean on the transportation package, and but for his delegation of authority to me, we wouldn't have had it. It's now my job to figure out how those channels of power work in the Senate, and I will do so. But it appears to me at this point that I'm fortunate, and that Senator Knope is one of those who enjoys at least a modicum of that power. So I look forward to working on this issue. I know it's going to come up. I know it's going to be there. I know but for Peter Courtney's efforts, we would have had to have voted on this session. But he headed it off, thank God. It's an extraordinarily complicated matter.
Thank you. Scott, do you have anybody over on your side that's waiting with a burning question? Looks like Carol.
I do.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Carolyn Egan with the City of Bend, and I would love to hear about what's on the agenda for next session regarding affordable housing.
Affordable housing is what she said, yes.
I don't take burning questions, those are too hot. Carolyn, it's a great question. I think a lot of it is going to be the detail of, kind of filling in the details of what we did this session with, there are two main bills. One of them was kind of a funding, but mostly a funding bill. There are folks from, I believe it's a big city northwest of us, that would like some stuff like rent control and some other things that they somehow think is going to lead to affordable housing, which is actually going to lead to less affordable housing. And so our real job for our next session is to make sure that the money that is going to be raised through the recording fees is spent wisely, and that it's distributed equitably, because in the past it has not been, and our region has been a donor party to others, and we would like to actually receive equitable dollars back to the region for affordable housing, really important. And a lot of us are trying to look to more market-based solutions, but one of those has to be the opportunity to bring in more land and have the ability for kind of market forces to get reset and to work. But we are open to other ideas. We all now have come out of the short session where in the Senate we only had one bill, thanks to me, you're welcome, and because that was my idea, and I originally got blamed, and by the end of the session, everybody's going, yeah, that was a good idea. It's like, yeah, it was. We should have no bills, but in the House they didn't quite adapt to that. They wanted to hang on to their two bills, and now we have unlimited bills for the 2019 session. And so if you have bill ideas, don't hesitate to talk to us early, because now is the opportunity, throughout the spring and summer to be able to craft those ideas that you might like on affordable housing or other issues that you really care about. So we're happy to do that for you. Okay.
House Bill 4007 passed. That was this session's attempt to address some of that. Two forms: a first-time home buyer savings account that would be like 529 health savings account over 8 years, allowing millennials to in essence put away some money to buy, since they have to actually put up 20%. That, and it also addresses some affordable housing issues. So if we just addressed it, I have not heard of any new ideas coming in 2019. I've heard of rehash. There certainly is a Democratic primary in Portland that will decide the fate of rent control. And if Shemia Fagan, recruited by Tina Kotek, takes out a sitting state senator, Democrat, then that will topple Peter Courtney, and the speaker will get rent control and a whole host of other stuff. If Rodman Rowan wins, Peter Courtney stays, and then there has to be a negotiating consensus. So we're watching out in the Democrat politics of Portland, frankly, the future of a lot of housing issues, because it's become a street fight. And those of us in Central Oregon are more reliant on trying to have targeted bills about UGB expansion and at least speeding the process, but not trying to trump the process.
I have a comment over here, just real quick. I'd like to introduce a friend of ours, John Audley, with the Oregon Business Council, who's worked with us throughout the years. Some of you have heard of the Central Oregon Business Council. I think you might have a couple of ideas and comments to interject as well.
Thanks, Jamie. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here and great to be a partner of our friends in Central Oregon. My question to you reflects on a priority that OBC and the other business associations have identified for next year, and that's the fiscal cliff that we are facing. What can we do to help you prepare for the major fiscal conversation that we'll have in the upcoming session? And how can we position Central Oregon to be a leading voice in that?
We got fiscal cliff right here.
Yeah, I knew that. So, so the issue, I was kind of surprised that we didn't see a focus on what I believe is the solution ultimately to the question. And the solution is you can't address the fiscal issues without addressing spending, revenue reform, and PERS. So if you can put all three of those in one space and begin to address those tough issues, then you could actually have some folks bear down on the possibility of changing our revenue system. But I'll share with you a thought. We saw an outside influence on Oregon, that is the Federal Tax Reform Act, offer an opportunity, if you will, for Oregon to spend less. How is that? Well, because the way the federal law worked, it said if you're a small business and there are 300,000 of you, you are going to get a 20% tax cut. And that's how this new act worked when it came to Oregon. But guess what? Our Democrat colleagues decided that they would disconnect from that part of the new law. Okay, so the bill passed, and this is the one that was mentioned earlier that the governor is considering vetoing, but I think that unlikely, but maybe she will. If she does, she is basically helping 200,000 to 300,000 Oregon businesses. But think about this for a minute. There was an opportunity for this state not to spend that money. Did we need that money? The answer was probably not. But when given the opportunity to not bring that money in the door and then spend it, what did my Democrat colleagues do? They said, hey, we got to have the money even though we don't need it. They knew, this is proved by the fact that by bringing that money in, we will see the kicker kick. And when the kicker kicks, the money will come right back out. So that money was not needed this time around because obviously they're going to give it back. This was done because of future budgets. So if we're going to talk about not spending money, I will share with you right now, it's a really difficult conversation. But you can't talk about going out and reforming revenue if you don't talk about how you're going to address spending, and you can't talk about revenue without talking about PERS. So why don't we see a committee being formed up that addresses all three of those issues, just as I had suggested. Actually, I went to Speaker Kotek, I went to other leaders in the House and the Senate and suggested exactly this, and sadly that is not happening. Too bad.
Yeah, we have to have cost containment, and if you don't have cost containment, there's two ways. You all are business owners. You can increase your revenue or you can lower your costs. And nobody ever wants to seem to look at lowering costs. It's just like, oh, well, that's what our costs are. Well, why are they that way? We need to ask those really hard questions and make sure we get to the right solution. And so cost containment should come first. So PERS reform, reform of our healthcare system for all public employees, and try to find the most efficient way to provide that. as we possibly can. And then we can talk about revenue reform and what that looks like and the most efficient way to collect revenue and what we actually need. And I know the Student Success Committee that was recently formed is going to be going around the state. We will be in Central Oregon in July. We are going to be next week in Eugene and Springfield area. And we're going to be taking public testimony. And a lot of the reforms are going to be addressed or come out of ideas will likely come out of that committee. So I would encourage you to kind of keep track of that particular group. 7 senators, 7 representatives, and hopefully we will have some good solutions come 2019. But it's going to take business involvement to make sure that stays on track, because we don't want to hear from kind of the same thing from the same people who want to spend the state's money, because we already know, everybody knows how to say yes to spend money. What a lot of people haven't learned yet is maybe that's not the right way to spend it, and maybe we need to be more efficient in how we spend it. And a lot of us have been in business and know that lowering your costs, or at least containing the increases in those costs, are going to be critically important going forward, because we literally do have a financial cliff that was created by essentially bringing on programs that we didn't have to pay for until later. And so, whether it was the Oregon Health Plan or what have you, we just didn't have the money to pay for those. So when we brought in all the new eligibles, at some point we were going to have a big problem, and we put off that problem until 2019, but literally it has to be resolved, or there's going to be a lot of trauma to a lot of families across Oregon. Mr. Leader, did you have any comments on that fiscal cliff?
There is, at least the House Republicans have very clearly told Governor Brown and Speaker Kotek that we will need them to do 3 things, which is the implementation of the Oregon Business Plan developed by John and others from the Oregon Business Council. And that says that we would shape our policy for the next 10 to 20 years to grow our economy, reduce the rate of spending, and reform revenue to match the needs we have. Because if you look at the cost of citizens based upon government, when you amortize it over a lifetime, people are expensive in their first 18 years. I mean, I was recently at a 5th grade classroom. I told those snot-nosed kids, go get a job, it costs us a lot of money. So we subsidize Oregonians until they're out of high school by a month. They get health care, they get a free education, those teachers are expensive. And then when they hit about 60, the cost per student or per citizen starts rising. So between about 20 and 60, people are, contributors. And the reality of our demographic trends is that we're in an expensive time period. I don't know if you guys realize that, but just look at the demographics of Oregon. We have this perfect storm, and that is we have these legacy obligations under Tier 1 PERS, bad deals struck by previous leaders. We have demographic challenges in the expensive paradigms of state resources. And we have a regulator that has not reduced the rate of spending. The combination of the 3 is that this thing is racing. And the only reason we haven't had a major crisis that you feel it is because you are producing so much income from the state government. It's just we're swimming in it. Okay? When that reduces, there's going to be cries about the children the disabled, seniors, veterans. I'll give you a great example. I don't know how many people here voted for marijuana, the initiative, but the tax for marijuana is supposed to go to education, right? The legislature, because they messed up and no one wanted to reduce back on some spending, took part of that money and spent it on mental health. Good thing. That's a good thing. But that violated what the people voted. So we, in the legislature this time, were told, we passed, mostly a partisan line basis, a bill to say that was okay retroactive. So no one in here would say that spending taxes derived from marijuana sales on mental health is a bad thing. Except that's not what you guys voted for. And then, of course, expands it. And then 2 years from now, when that money's not there, that constituency comes to Salem and says, why are you cutting our program? And so on, and so on, and so on. That's the cliff. I don't know if you guys know this, 10,000 baby boomers hit age 65 every single day in our country. Oregon is an aging state. We are set up for a catastrophic financial state crisis. And unfortunately, your leaders in Salem and your current governor have not done anything. The business plan developed by Oregon Business Council and others, Republicans privately and publicly have said, we will raise taxes. We will raise taxes. We will reform revenue. But we're only going to do that if you meet us halfway and we begin to say over the next 20 years we will only grow government by X amount per biennium, within that to match the demographic trends, and we'll have whatever reforms on first that are legally acceptable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Meet us halfway. They have not. But I can tell you what, you will hear Measure 97 redo, you're going to hear student success. Do you know this committee's gone all over in this town? You know, I'll just be blunt. Can I be blunt? When you have a committee set up and it's called Student Success Committee, what do you think is the outcome of that committee? Let's just, before there's even one hearing, what do you think is the conclusion of that committee?
Increase student success.
Raise taxes. Bottom line is, there is no consensus in Salem right now to meet halfway. There is only one message, frankly, coming from the governor's office. Give me more money. And until we actually acknowledge that this economy that you guys are producing for us, if you guys can drive the revenue rates at 13, 14, 15% biennium increases, if you can do that for the next 20 years, we're golden. Thank you for doing that, by the way. I look forward to you guys doing it every 2 years. And if we continue that rate, we have no problems. If we don't, there's going to be great difficulties. The guy who has sounded this alarm for 15 years is Gene Wisnick, who developed the transparency website.
Tell them where to go to see what
Oregon.gov/transparency. House Bill 2500 in 2009 when Republicans were super minority. Oregon.gov/transparency. Let me add a little bit here. The question, you know, we need more money. Go back 15 months. What was the front page of every paper in this state? We're short $1.6 billion. Remember that? The sky's falling. The tsunami's coming. 1.6 billion. We had plenty of money. We had plenty of money. And then, as my friend, my honorable colleagues up here talked about, they went and took away from businesses. You're supposed to be business. They took away $100 million of your money for more money. In the 2017 session, even though I've been there a long time, I finally figured out what the provider tax was. Okay? You know that 1 out of 4 Oregonians are on the Oregon Health Plan? 1 out of 4 Oregonians. I read up, there was a great article. 11 weeks, one of the best papers in the state, or at least holding the state accountable. They talked about You know, how we got the Oregon Health Plan, how we got to Obamacare. With the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, Oregon went from 600,000 on Oregon Health Plan to $1 million. 1 out of 4 Oregonians are on Oregon Health Plan. That costs money. It's not free. Your businesses and everyone else are paying for it. So the provider tax, they came to us, and what I finally learned now, the legislature goes to these hospitals and says, we're giving you all these more clients. You're getting 1 million, you got 1 million clients now that the federal government's going to pay for. So you give us some of that money. That's what the provider tax is. Who do the hospitals, they come to you to get that money back, right? The point is that thanks to my friend Mike, I've worked trying, my colleagues talked about how, you got to control costs, we got to control costs. And that's the key thing. You've got to learn, your business people, you're in Chamber of Commerce, we want to help this. I'm so proud to move here. My wife's 4th generation Oregon. I'm so proud to be an Oregonian and a Bendite. And I do represent, Jamie, about 20,000 people in the city of Bend. But you give and you give and you give. But there's, they're putting, this is a sham of what they're doing on this provider tax. They even added more to it, what we've been giving them to the CCOs, right? So you've got leadership, you're involved. We want to be fair, we want to help people. That's what we're wasting money, and they're taking it out of businesses, $100 million, that you can employ people, you can pay more taxes. I have one of the things in my 15 years I really fought for is affordable housing. I joined my friend, I don't know what, I think Mike voted on the 4006 for the document, 4007 for the document fee. I was one of the sponsors. My name is on the bill to put the $15 document fee for affordable housing. My name was one of the sponsors of the bill that added $5 onto the document fee for veterans and emergency housing. $65 now. And there's no relationship. There's no relationship for what the people are finding the document and affordable housing. Okay? And do you know that 50% of document fees are not real estate related? Did you know that? It's, my 85-year-old lady's husband died, she has to go down and file a document for that. And she's got to change the deed on the house. So it's $130 that she's got to pay for that, to do that. Okay? The realtors came up with this, the plan to save money to buy a home. I'm told that there will not be a large number of people. I hope that there is. I've worked for 15 years on what's really affordable housing, Habitat for Humanity, and I've worked for manufactured park costs for those people. I even worked on the manufactured park home for Speaker Kotak's on some issues. So, cost control. You, business leaders, thank you for what you're doing, creating jobs, and being good citizens. Check get involved, look at these bills. You've done a good job with your leadership. Continue to do that. But there's John left us, but there's money there. We need to do some. Senator Cano said cost containment. I call it cost control. Mike and I are in ways and means. We ask a lot of questions. He does it better than I do. We ask a lot of questions. Why do you need that? What are you doing? How many thousands of people got received Oregon Health Plan that should have $30,000, millions of dollars in there? So their solution, they came in with a bill to us. They wanted $12 million to correct this, and hundreds of more people. Who got punished for what they did? It's a great state. It's good people. There's good people in Salem, but we have to hold them responsible.
Thanks, Representative. We've got just a little bit of time left here. I know Whitney's been back here waiting for comment for quite some time, very patiently. I think Scott's got some folks at the front. So other, real quick raise of hands who else has comments. It's Blair and Whitney. Anybody else? Carla? Okay, great. Whitney, you have been patient. Thank you.
So my initial question or comment was clarifying sort of the cognitive dissonance I was having about talking about a fiscal cliff and how a student success show or a tour was going to solve that. And I think I got a bit of an answer here that the bottom line is looking at where our tax revenue is coming from. I'm curious about, one, who is the audience for that? And as someone who works on the education side, I work for the High Desert Education Service District, how we can help bring the right voices that you all want to hear. That is now more just a comment. The other thing that I'm interested in hearing from you all about is, as a young woman who aspires to be in a public role, I was really bothered by the news that came out of Salem this year about Senator Cruz and the investigation about sexual assault and misconduct that happened at the Capitol, and what changes you all as elected representatives are taking to ensure that there is a safe working environment for our elected female professionals in Salem.
Well, I'll begin as one of the legislative leaders of the caucuses. Senator Cruz resigned. The conclusion of the independent investigation never mentioned the word assault, that he was guilty of sexual assault.
Groping and harassment.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. I read the investigation. It never said he committed sexual assault. He committed a hostile workplace, and that they concluded that based upon the propensity of his inappropriateness with women compared to men, that it had elevated into sexual harassment. He was told repeatedly, stop, and he chose not to. And he needed to resign. There were those of us who did not publicly call for his resignation because as a legislative leader, I had to stand by a process. Others were able to, unrestricted from that, be able to call publicly for his resignation. What we have done is committed, and I commend Speaker Kotek and President Courtney for hiring an independent investigation. And from that, they were able to show the flaws in the process. And number two, the presiding officers, together with the other legislative leaders, have asked the Oregon Law Commission to develop rules in which it's very clear that what is wrong and is inappropriate and has always been inappropriate, but because of a cultural overtone was not reported. The latter needs to be fixed. People need to feel safe, and as one of the 4 legislative leaders, I can assure you that we are going to correct this, and everyone who visits the Capitol, works at the Capitol, serves at the Capitol, is going to be in a safe environment. That being the case, Senator Cruz was not the only member of the legislature who has had reporting and been corrected. He was the member who didn't correct himself. And so there has to be a process, and there has to be a legislator or staff member who heeds, counsel, acknowledges responsibility, and corrects behavior. And when they don't do that, they need to go, because that's not acceptable. So I hope that answers your question. I can assure you that it's very serious, and it breaks my heart to hear stories like what came out from the victims of his harassment, and I hope to never have to see this happen again. But we acknowledged it, and now the environment, I think, is moving to a more appropriate place, and we have to be diligent to make sure that Oregonians, regardless of sexual orientation, or gender, or color, or background, no matter what an Oregonian, who or she is, that they have a safe environment to be at the Capitol. And I believe that is consistent with all of us here.
Kind of quick follow-up to that, we're going to get after a couple of these. Thank you for that finance representative. Thank you for asking.
Just wanted to follow up to that. My name is Eileen Kiley. I'm a candidate for 53rd. Senator Knopp, thank you very much for calling on Senator Cruz to resign. As a woman who's been in business for a long time, I really appreciate you standing up for us.
You're welcome.
And Representative McLean, do you understand, I just want to clarify your earlier comment, because you said that he was not found guilty of assault. But do you agree that being groped is in fact assault?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to engage with you in a public forum of the nature. I'm going to agree that the independent investigation reached its conclusions, and their conclusions were that he had committed a hostile work environment, and that they had concluded that it had been harassment and that it had deemed sexual harassment because of the occurrences. But I don't believe in that report, and maybe you've read it. You can correct me if you can show me the report where he was found to have committed sexual assault. Now, you've asked a question that I think you're trying to elicit a certain answer or response, and I just don't want to engage in that. If you want to talk privately, or if you want to stand up and make a public statement, say it. But all I can say is I read the report, and being one of the 4 legislative leaders to allow this process to completion, I stand by what the report said, and I agree that he needed to resign.
All right, thank you to both. Blair, you've been waiting with Scott over here. Thank you.
Let's shift gears on a lighter note here. On behalf of OSU Cascades, I wanted to thank you guys for everything that you did to help us get the funding for this next academic building. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your fight. This next academic building is a big deal, and having a 4-year education here in Central Oregon is critical to growing the area. It's critical to the young people here that need the next phase of their careers, and we look forward to serving Central Oregon and the entire state. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair.
Hi, quick question. Karen Gustafson, Central Oregon Builders Association. I have a quick question on system development charges. I want to move back to housing for just a second.
You're gonna have to hold it closer.
Oh, sorry. Apparently I'm not loud enough. System development charges, SDCs for short, and whether or not House Bill 4007, the recording fee that's allocated to affordable housing, but also was, I understand, amended to include workforce housing, whether any of that money could be used for infrastructure, for sewers, water, roads, any of those types of things, because as we know, when you tack on a system development charge to a house, it increases the price to the buyer because the developer and the builder doesn't actually pay it. It gets passed on through as a price to the buyer. Is there any chance we can divert some of that money, or maybe introduce a bill in 2019 to actually help use some of that money for infrastructure?
System development charges? What are those? The answer to your question, Carmen, is of course a bill can always be introduced. Does the bill that passed specifically allow that to happen? I think that's really unclear. I mean, I think it probably in some cases, or as part of a project, potentially, but I think it would have to be better defined than what it currently is. And that's, you know, when Carolyn asked her question about, you know, what are we going to do? I think there's a lot of clarification, just like there was with transportation. There's probably going to need to be some clarification and some wordsmithing of what actually can and can't be done with the money, and to make sure it's used in the most efficient way possible to create the really the greatest impact for our communities, for people who really do need affordable housing, and this community is one of them. So we're going to continue to work on that issue for the years to come, because I don't see it going away anytime soon.
You know, since I have a microphone, I'm going to ask, or I'm going to let you kind of elaborate on something. It is an election year, as we know, and I would like to invite you to speak a little bit about what a supermajority looks like, and what a supermajority might do to us as a community and as business owners, because we are dangerously close to a supermajority in this election year, and what people should pay attention to possibly avoid any one party having a supermajority.
Well, As some of you may know, the ability to raise taxes in Oregon by the legislature is done with a supermajority, not a simple majority. So a simple majority is 31 and 16, and a supermajority is 36 and 18. And in the House right now, they are 35 in the majority party, and in the Senate, they are at 17, one shy in each chamber. Should they get a supermajority of 36 or more, or 18 or more, those of us in the minority will only be needed to create a quorum for them to meet and do what they want. And the voices of people outside of Portland and Eugene will go away because they can pass the policy that they want and the politics that are good for their communities. And if you've been around me long enough, and some of you have, I like to say it's important that we pass and create good policy, not just good politics. Sometimes those align for a certain individual or a certain party. Many times they do not. And in a supermajority situation, they don't have to listen and they don't have to move toward consensus. They just agree amongst themselves, and those folks tend to be from west of I-5, and those of us who are east of I-5, and our voices will no longer matter. And they won't need us to get to consensus, bipartisanship, and I would say that President Peter Courtney has done a great job in the Senate of making sure that minority voices are heard, and that if we can, and you can't always, but if we can, we get to a bipartisan solution on significant issues. And I'll just give you several, because I was involved with them. The Equal Pay Act of 2017 didn't have to be, and wasn't, bipartisan in the House. In the Senate it was. It actually became a 30-0 vote, unanimously bipartisan. And then ultimately, in the House, it became that as well. There was a scheduling bill. So in the hospitality industry, hotel, motel, retail, there was, amongst advocates, an interest in a very damaging bill that would have really hamstrung business to be able to operate the way they needed to operate. But because Senate President Peter Courtney said, I want a bipartisan bill, we were able to work in the Senate to get a bipartisan scheduling bill. And it's starting to become a model for other states. We were the first state in the country to have a statewide scheduling bill. And then there was a bill that addressed a double overtime issue for manufacturing that ultimately became a bipartisan bill. And it didn't really start out like it was even going to pass and have a fix. And then we were able to get a bipartisan bill going, and ultimately that ended up that way. But in a supermajority situation, there's too much pressure from the people who elected that supermajority for what they want, that they don't need to listen to the other side. And so the closer the numbers are, regardless of where the R's are in control or the D's are in control, and I've served in both, the closer the numbers are, the more well served all the people of Oregon, especially Central, Eastern, and Southern Oregon, are without a supermajority and with close numbers in the legislature, because everybody has to work together. And I think the good representative is going to tell us about a certain session where the numbers were incredibly close. Mr. Retiree, please.
Thank you for the question, Scott. It's not political tonight, it's supposed to be, but I have served in the majority, I have served in the minority, I've served in the super minority. Cliff and I did in the super minority, and I've also served 30-30 in the House. And a lot of people said it should be a constitutional requirement to have a 30-30 legislative body. That way we could do better for the people of Oregon, because as Senator Canuck said, they will drive through their policy. It's tough now, and the numbers we have now. And I encourage you, I gave you the transparency. I hope you're looking at the Oregon Legislative Information System, OLIS. Go look at the tough bills. Go look at the tough bills and see how many votes from the other party people come off, because it's not good policy. It's not good policy for the whole state, okay? And the people in certain districts in the majority party will come off those votes because they have it, because of the numbers they have. But it was not fun being a super minority, as Coach said. Cliff and I, they had to have us there for quorum. Other than that, they can pass policy bills and tax bills. And I don't think that reflects the I-5 corridor. My wife grew up in Portland, fourth generation, or Portlander, and the state's different. And we should have more compromise and working together. No 33rd. And I definitely like the majority too.
Well, what a great message to have transparency and trying to do our best for all the people of the state. Final quick comments, Representative McLean, we're a little bit over, and Senator Vance, and then we'd like to thank you all and let you have one-on-one time.
Well, I think with, Jamie, we have to thank you and the Chamber for helping us in a short session. I think most people know from politics that tribalism is rampant. Gotcha politics permeates everywhere. And if we're going to be productive, and if we're going to try to produce results that serve our constituents in the region of Central Oregon, we have to have the ability to not hold people to perfection. We don't have to agree with each other 100% of the time. In fact, Lyndon Johnson said that if you find two people who agree 100% of the time, you'll find one person doing the thinking. And so in the end, what we're trying to do in this environment where it's very volatile is to work together from Central Oregon, play team sports, if you will, and make sure our region is protected. And that I think great things can still come. I think Kate Brown, if she's reelected, can produce revenue reform. And if I think Tina Kotek and Peter Courtney, as respective presiding officers, can get there as well. But there has to be an environment where people are willing to bring their sacred cows to the table and realize that every so often we all have to compromise, which is not a dirty move, but we have to compromise for the good of the whole and for the good of our grandchildren's generation. I hope in Oregon we can achieve that in 2019 or in 2021. At a certain point, we're going to have to do it. And we can't do it if we don't hear what's happening to you, how legislation is impacted. And your communication with the Chamber, the Chamber's communication with us is absolutely critical. And so thank you, Jamie, and all the rest.
Thank you, that's great advice.
Well, thank you for this great opportunity. It's been said that democracy is constantly changing its very nature, and seeing folks here so interested in politics is a wonderful thing. I want to mention one thing about this issue of harassment. I've done a great deal of reading on it in an attempt to figure out an answer to your question. And one of the best examples, although not a solution that I saw, of capturing the essence of a problem, at least to the person who was writing this article I read, was this. Those of us who were worried about the due process for Senator Cruz had a point. But those others who said, what about due process for those who have been harmed? And I think what's happening is people are quick to say those who have been accused are entitled to due process, but why aren't we just as concerned about those who have been harmed and they're getting due process? And that, of course, is what we've been trying to do in the Senate and the House by holding all kinds of trainings and other things to raise people's awareness of how they should not be acting. I will just say that this is a constant battle, and that's what the net result of all of my reading has been. But I know my sensitivity to this problem has been raised dramatically, and I'll be doing my best to make sure that those who have been harmed or alleged they've been harmed get their share of due process as like those who are charged. The other thing, this affordable housing thing, I didn't get a chance to say something about it. extraordinarily complex, and I will be doing all I can to learn about it to try to help, because it's a huge, huge, huge problem, and one that we need to be spending more time on. So very happy to hear what we should do about system development charges, which I'm all too aware of. But anyway, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for this opportunity.
Senator Banks, Representative McLean, and of course, honoring you on your way out, Representative Wizet. To all of you, thank you for your service, and thank you for being here tonight. And thank you to all our guests as well. Thank you.